When progress becomes a trap, the invisible exit set is reshaping America. I recently sat down with Aretha Duncan, a force of nature who has spent her entire career dismantling the invisible walls that keep Black women locked out of economic power. Aretha doesn't just advocate for change, she architects it. She's touched thousands of lives, rebuilt broken systems from the inside out, and her insights into what's happening right now in our workforce are nothing short of earth shattering. What she revealed to me challenges every comfortable assumption we hold about progress, about opportunity, about who we leave behind when we celebrate how far we've come. We are obsessed with progress stories. We love the narrative arc that bends toward justice, the steady climb up the ladder, the belief that hard work and determination will eventually pay off. For a while, it seemed like that story was finally becoming true for Black women in America's workforce. The numbers looked good. The headlines celebrated milestones. Black women were entering federal service at rates nearly double their representation in the overall labor force. They were breaking into industries that had historically barred the doors. They were building careers, securing benefits, creating the kind of stability their mothers and grandmothers could only dream about. But here's what Aretha helped me see, and here's what should terrify every single one of us. Progress is not a protected status, it's not a guarantee. And when the systems that made that progress possible are systematically dismantled, when the scaffolding gets kicked out from under you, the fall is not gradual, it's catastrophic. Let me paint you a picture of what's been unfolding. In 2025, over 200,000 federal employees walked out of their jobs because of federal downsizing. Think about that number for a moment. 200,000 people. Among them, about 55,000 were Black workers, and a significant portion of those were Black women who had found something rare and precious in public service: stable employment, equitable pay, a pathway to advancement that didn't require them to be twice as good to get half as far. These weren't just jobs. Let me be crystal clear about this. These were anchors. These were the foundation upon which Black families built their futures, sent their children to college, bought homes, planned retirements. These were the positions where Black women didn't have to code switch through every conversation or smile through microaggressions in every meeting just to prove they belong. And here's the part that should make every single person in this room pause and reckon with what we've allowed to happen. Before these cuts, yes, Black women made up 12% of the federal workforce, 12%, nearly double their share of the labor force overall. Why? Because for decades, the public sector offered something the private sector consistently failed to provide: a meritocracy that actually functioned, a space where your work could speak louder than the color of your skin, a place where you could build a career without constantly defending your right to be there. But when those jobs vanished, so did that stability. And we're not just talking about unemployment statistics on a spreadsheet. We're talking about the systematic erosion of institutional knowledge. We're talking about communities losing advocates who understood their struggles from lived experience. We're talking about families suddenly without health insurance, without retirement security, without the ability to plan beyond next week. Now, you might be thinking, surely the private sector can absorb these talented women. Surely there are opportunities waiting elsewhere. And that's where Aretha's insights become even more devastating. Because at the exact same moment, the public sector was contracting, the private sector was systematically dismantling the very programs that had helped Black women gain even a toehold in the first place. Listen to this. From 2022 to 2024, job postings for diversity, equity, and inclusion roles dropped by 43%. 43%. Employee resource groups, those networks that provided mentorship, sponsorship, and community for Black women navigating predominantly white corporate spaces were dissolved, budgets were cut, positions were eliminated, and suddenly the infrastructure that had enabled Black women to not just enter these spaces, but to thrive in them, to advance in them, was systematically torn down. And we need to be brutally honest about what these programs actually were. They weren't charity, they weren't handouts, they weren't special treatment. They were the bridges that closed what researchers call the network gap. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud: most jobs, especially the good ones, the ones with power and influence and wealth building potential, are filled through networks, through someone knowing someone, through a mentor making a strategic introduction, through a sponsor advocating for you in rooms you're not in yet. And when you've been historically excluded from those networks, when your parents didn't attend the same universities, didn't work at the same firms, didn't play golf at the same country clubs, you need intentional structures to build those connections. DEI programs were those structures, they were the equalizers. And when they disappeared, Black women found themselves right back where their grandmother started, on the outside, looking in, watching opportunities flow to the same people who've always received them. The result? A mass exodus. Black women leaving the workforce not because they don't want to work, not because they lack qualifications, not because they're making some kind of lifestyle choice to stay home and relax. They're leaving because the systems that supported their participation have been deliberately pulled out from under them. And the economic impact should wake up every economist, every business leader, every policymaker in this country. In just a few months, the departure of Black women from the workforce has cost the United States economy an estimated $37.2 billion. $37.2 billion. Read that again. That's not just a loss for Black women and their families. That's a loss for every single one of us. That's innovation that will never happen. That's leadership that will never emerge. That's economic growth that will never materialize. That's tax revenue that will never fund our schools and infrastructure. But here's where Aretha's perspective shifts from devastating to transformative, because she didn't just share statistics with me. She shared something that gives me hope even in the face of this crisis. She told me about the Black women who are refusing to accept this narrative of retreat and defeat. She told me about the 9 Black women now serving as mayors in major United States cities. 9. That's more than double the number from just a decade ago. Sit with that tension for a moment. At the exact same time, Black women are being systematically pushed out of traditional workforce structures. They're breaking through at the highest levels of political leadership. It took Detroit over 324 years to elect its first Black woman mayor. 324 years. But now, across this country, Black women aren't just participating in politics, they're leading entire cities. They're reshaping policy agendas around housing, public safety, economic development. They're building coalitions. They're demonstrating what becomes possible when you stop waiting for permission and start claiming power. These mayors are implementing innovative policies that address systemic challenges their cities have faced for generations. They're creating pathways for other Black women to lead. They're serving as living proof that representation matters, that when Black women are given platforms and power, they transform communities. But here's what we absolutely cannot do: we cannot look at those 9 mayors and say, see, yeah, everything's fine. We cannot point to individual breakthrough stories and use them as evidence to ignore the systemic crisis unfolding around us. Because for every Black woman breaking through to mayoral leadership, there are thousands struggling to find stable employment, thousands watching their economic security evaporate, thousands making impossible choices about how to feed their families and keep roofs over their heads. This is the trap of the exceptional narrative. We celebrate the one who makes it and use her success to justify the system that's failing everyone else. We hold up the exception and pretend it's the rule. And in doing so, we let ourselves off the hook from addressing the structural barriers that make success the exception rather than the norm. So, what do we do? How do we respond to this moment? Aretha was unflinching about this. We need to stop pretending that individual resilience is the answer. We need to stop telling Black women to work harder, to be more strategic, to network better, as if the problem is their effort rather than the systems that are systematically failing them. We need to rebuild the infrastructure that supports Black women's workforce participation. That means restoring and expanding public sector employment. That means not just defending DEI programs, but strengthening them, funding them adequately, making them more than performative gestures, making them actual pathways to power and advancement. That means creating mentorship and sponsorship programs with real teeth, programs that don't disappear the moment the political winds shift or the budget gets tight. And it means something else, something more personal. It means those of us who have power in organizations, who make hiring decisions, who control budgets, who set policy. We need to ask ourselves a hard, uncomfortable question. When the structures that supported Black women's advancement were being dismantled, what did we do? Did we fight to keep them? Did we speak up in the meetings where these decisions were made? Did we find alternative ways to ensure equity? Or did we stay silent? Did we shrug and move on? Perhaps even relieved that we didn't have to think about diversity anymore. Because here's the truth we need to face: the exodus of Black women from the workforce is not a natural phenomenon. It's not an inevitable market correction. It's not the invisible hand of economics at work. It's the predictable, foreseeable result of deliberate policy choices. And policy choices can be unmade, they can be reversed, they can be replaced with better ones. But that requires us to act. Not someday, not when it's convenient, not when the budget allows or when the political climate is more favorable. Now, this week, today, because every single day we wait, more Black women are pushed out, more families lose their foundation, more potential goes unrealized, more communities lose advocates, more of our collective economic future disappears. The soft girl era is about learning to be soft in a world that taught us survival. But let me be clear about something: softness is not passivity, softness is not acceptance of injustice, softness is not silence in the face of systemic harm. Softness means having the courage to rest when you need to set boundaries that protect your peace, to prioritize your well being without apology, and it also means having the courage to fight for systems that allow all of us, especially Black women, to thrive without having to be superhuman just to survive. Aretha Duncan is doing that work every single day. She's building bridges, she's challenging systems, she's refusing to accept that this is just how things are. And the question for each of us, the question I'm leaving you with today, um, is this: will you join her? Will you use whatever power you have, whatever platform you stand on, whatever influence you hold to build a world where Black women don't have to choose between survival and softness, where they can have both economic stability and joy, where their contributions are not just celebrated in speeches and social media posts, but protected in policy and practice? What will you do this week? Not next month, not when you have more time. This week. Will you examine the hiring practices in your organization? Will you advocate for the restoration of programs that create pathways for Black women? Will you mentor someone who doesn't look like you or come from your background? Will you use your voice in rooms where decisions are made to ensure that equity isn't just a buzzword, but a commitment? Because the world we need to build, the world where Black women can finally exhale, where they can be soft without being vulnerable to economic devastation, where their labor is valued and their humanity is honored, that world doesn't build itself. It requires each of us to make different choices, better choices, braver choices. The exodus is happening right now. The question is, will we let it continue? Or will we finally, collectively, build the systems that allow every Black woman to thrive? The choice is ours. The time is now. And the stakes have never been higher.